Today, we're going to give you a cautionary tale about starting a nonprofit and something you need to know in advance before you walk into starting one from scratch. Now, I have a whole course on starting nonprofits, the ins and outs, and whatever. I'm not getting into all of that today. Today, we're going to talk about one specific portion that people don't consider, and that is your bylaws and your lack of ownership when you run something as a nonprofit versus running it as a social enterprise. Now, the big drawback, just getting it off the table when you're opening it as a for profit social enterprise versus a nonprofit, is that you can't give donation receipts. So companies will be less inclined to work with you because usually a corporation is doing so because they want that donation receipt at the end of the year. And if you're not a nonprofit, you can't offer that to donors. So if you are going to be accepting donations from either the public or other corporations, you need to be a nonprofit. Why that's a problem per se is something in the bylaws. See, when you own a company, a for-profit company, you're the owner, right? Or you and your partner or whoever that you decide to start this thing with, you guys own it and nobody can take that from you. There's few and far between are the ways that somebody can come and take you out of your position as the owner of a business. When there's a nonprofit instead, what happens is you need to appoint a board of directors. And everybody on this board of directors have to be, at least a certain percentage, depending on where you live, have to be unrelated to you, including marriage. So even your cousin's wife wouldn't count. You know what I mean? So even extended family is not allowed. Related by marriage is not allowed. And believe me, they find this stuff out. Because what happens is if you don't follow those rules, then there's another point of litigation or weakness where they could say that your board is not legal, right? So that could open a whole other set of problems for you. So the issue is that you have to choose people for your nonprofit's board of directors that you trust implicitly because they're not related to you. So, not that families don't screw each other, but you know what I mean. So, the problem is that, you know, how it goes, people's egos get vested, and suddenly one person on the board thinks they know better than everybody. Maybe the president of the board, you know, because you're the president because this is your baby. You know, maybe a few people on the board a year from now decide they don't like the way you run it and they think that they could do better. Well, there's usually these little clauses inside your bylaws because when you start a nonprofit, you have to provide bylaws. And so you can write them, they can say whatever it is within a certain framework that describes the rules and regulations around how your nonprofit's going to run in terms of the board of directors. Who's allowed to do what do you need in order to make changes? I mean, they're complicated. They're you know, it's a wide scope of stuff, but basically it's that kind of thing. And usually in a clause, they'll have things like emergency meetings. How many members of the board of directors need to meet in order for a meeting to qualify, you know, on the books. And so let's say the majority of the board decide they don't like you anymore or think they could do it better. They could literally have an emergency meeting behind your back and not even tell you unless you make sure, which is why I'm making this video, unless you make sure this stuff is covered in the bylaw. Because what happens is you'll either go to a lawyer or you'll buy one of those, you know, cut and paste templates online, which are really standard. So to make it easy, standard bylaws say, well, as long as the majority of you meet in a meeting, you don't have to notify everybody else on the board. And as long as there's a majority of people in that secret meeting, you guys can vote on pretty much anything, including getting rid of your president. I've seen this happen. I've done it. Like I've been in these boardroom hit moves where we've removed people and it'll stun you. You'll end up getting a letter in the mail from a lawyer saying pursuant to section 2.342, you're no longer a member of the board, voted unanimously or whatever by secret meeting, and you're out. And there's nothing you can do. So imagine if this is your baby. Because this is what happens when people start nonprofits. It's usually because they're doing this work in the community. And then it gets so big, they have to get organized and they decide they're going to open. So this is something you've probably put your heart, your life, your soul, your ego, your identity in this thing. and in one secret meeting, they could kick you out. So even if you start with a perfect board of directors and these are all your pals and everybody's great, that's great today. But what happens 10 years from now? What happens if you have a calamity in your life? So you kind of drop the ball for a bit, you lose everything. Everything you've built, you could lose in one meeting because maybe you went through a phase in your life where you dropped the ball. At least when you own your own company, you can run the company into the ground, but that's yours to do. No one's going to pluck it from you. And that's where you're at risk with a nonprofit. Now, by me saying this, it's not that I'm trying to discourage people from starting nonprofits. If you're depending on donations or you're going to be accepting donations from people or companies, you need to have a nonprofit. What I'm telling you is that when you're working on those bylaws and you're buying one of those DIY bylaw formats or templates, that you tweak some of the clauses to protect you. If this is your baby, if it's not, and this is a collective and you guys are starting this together and whatever, then that's different. But if this is your baby, you know what I mean? If it's your baby, you want to make sure that you can protect yourself. What somebody else I know, what they did was they found a way to make their nonprofit self sustaining so that they don't need to get corporate donations and they don't need to get donation receipts. What they do is they work with corporations that aren't looking for the tax break. What they're looking for is marketing, or the PR value. So, for example, if they're not selling jam, but I'm making this as an example. If that organization is selling jam to fundraise, right? So, and let's say proceeds from every one of those jam containers goes to charity because that's the way that social enterprise, which is for profit, works. It's for profit, but it's run like a nonprofit in terms of community um, assistance that it offers and things of that nature. So then what ends up happening is because the corporation is buying jam, it's an expense for them anyway. It's not the same as getting a donation receipt for taxes, but at least it's an expense. So at least they can claim it as an expense and they get amazing PR value for it. So you just have to market your social enterprise to those kind of partnerships, which are niche. So you're not gonna it's not gonna be as easy, let's say, than getting corporate donations where you can offer someone a tax receipt. You know what I mean? And then it also spares you an uncomfortable conversation if you have a registered charity that or foundation that you can give receipts from. So anyway, I'm not trying to discourage anybody from opening nonprofits, but I do want you to take a look at your bylaws and make sure that you're protected. Have a great day.